Something clicks, and it is the most amazing, fulfilling thing to watch when a woman comes in and says, I'm not a hunter, my husband hunts, I might go, but I just want to know more and we'll see. And she leaves and I can do this. This is great. I'm in. And we have so many women that have taken their first animal in camp, and we have such a supportive group, and they come back into camp honking their horn, and all the girls run out and everybody cheers for them, and there's high fives and hugs, and it's like this awesome moment. We get to celebrate together. We all go to the skinny shed together, and it's so much fun.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. How we doing, Tony?
Morning, Bear. Doing well.
I feel like we haven't been in the seat in a minute. We gotta make up some time here.
I think it's been week and a half?
Yeah, a couple weeks.
Week and a half.
Today's guest is Brittany Boddington. Brittany has made a significant mark in the world of big game hunting and outdoor television. After excelling in synchronized swimming and pursuing a career in film and modeling, she took quite the pivot. Her passion for hunting was ignited on a safari with her father, who's also a renowned outdoorsman, Craig Boddington. Since then, Brittany has hunted on 6 continents, hosted numerous outdoor TV shows, and written for top publications like Petersen's Hunting Magazine. She also founded the She Hunts skill camps to inspire the next generation of hunters. Now based in Phoenix, Arizona, she continues to build on her family's legacy as a dedicated hunter and conservationist. And why we're excited for Brittany today, talk through Brittany today is, a lot of you know we have our outdoor brand, Born Primitive Outdoor, and this may also come as a surprise to some, but 70% of our customers at Born Primitive are women. So as we kind of broach the topic of hunting, I think there's a lot of reservations, particularly from women on hunting. Some men, but more so you typically see it with the ladies. And I think what Brittany has done is pretty exciting in that space. So that's kind of what we wanted to get into a little bit, but also hear your story a little bit. So Brittany, thank you so much for coming on to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I want to start with you had a successful start in film, modeling, and synchronized swimming. Is it?
It's an old bio. Yeah, a million years ago. Yes.
Well, yeah. Well, don't worry. I'm getting to it. I'm about to pivot it. Let me finish the question.
Okay.
But then you made the pivot from that to hunting, particularly some big game stuff. So talk us through that evolution and how you landed there.
Well, I'll give you a Cliff Notes version. I was born and raised in LA, if that answers some questions for you. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and no one I knew hunted. My parents got divorced when I was real young, so my dad would go on hunting trips, but I was not on those trips. And I just wasn't exposed to it. I mean, we had heads on the wall, but it was like bad wallpaper for me when I was little. I just didn't see them. I was so used to them. And people would ask what my dad did, and I said he was a writer. They would come over to the house and figure out what kind of writer he was. But otherwise, I think they assumed like a sport at like basketball or something. So no one really knew until they would come to the house and be like, huh. And so, it wasn't really an issue in my life at all until I was about 17. My dad told me that he was going to take me to Africa when I graduated high school for my graduation present. And I made him promise not to kill anything in front of me. It was supposed to be a photo safari. As far on the other side as you can imagine. And as the trip started approaching, I started doing more and more research about what you can do in Namibia. And as you can imagine, in the early 2000s, the basis of their tourism was hunting. There was some ecotourism and some photo safaris, but hunting kept popping up as a suggested thing to do in Namibia. And the more I read about it, the more I started coming around to the idea of taking the non-breeding older male out of the herd so that the younger ones would have food to eat for the next season. And all of that started to make a lot more sense. So I told my dad at one point, if we're going all the way to Africa, you should probably teach me how to shoot in case I want to go hunting while we're there. And he was like, honey, that's not how this works. You book a safari or you don't. You don't just go and dabble. And so he said, okay, if this is what you want to do, then we're going to teach you how to shoot, but you're going to have to go on a hunt here in California at the time for a wild boar in order to prove to me that you're serious before I book us a safari and we get there and you chicken out. And so we did go learn how to shoot. He took me to the range and then we went and shot a pig up in Paso Robles in Northern California. And it was awesome. I had a great time. It was a great connector for me and my dad. It was very cool for him to be able to be the mentor on that. And we went to Africa on a safari in 2003 with Dirk de Bod. I still hunt with him to this day. He's amazing. And I took 5 animals in that first safari and I was hooked, not just on hunting, but on Africa as well.
Well, I find this is interesting, and I think a lot can relate. Is you're some LA chick that like is probably the most anti-hunt ever. I mean, I would imagine maybe you kind of hinted at that. So how did like what was that epiphany that occurred to cause you to completely 180? Because I would imagine there might be some girls listening that are 100% in the camp of who you used to be, right? And then you had this complete change of heart. So what is that transformation? What causes it, and how, you know, once you have a changed perspective? And what I like, you hit on kind of the conservation angle, and I think that's another misconception with hunting. Is I think people think hunting is just a bunch of hillbillies that don't care about, you know, the environment, and it's actually, once you learn about it, it's literally the exact opposite. But I think there's just this connotation of like people that are just intellectually inferior and they're just out, you know, killing animals, and how could you do that? And it's like once you get in there, it's a completely different ball game. So I wonder if that was part of your kind of transformation a bit. But walk us through that.
Well, I'll tell you what I tell a lot of people about She Hunts as well, is that women especially do better with more information. So the more information you have, the more comfortable you can be with any given topic. And I feel like one of the things that we really struggle with getting women out in the field is prepping them properly. Because so many people, and good meaning, you know, husbands, fathers, boyfriends, whatever, take a woman, they teach them how to shoot, and they go out in the field, but the woman still knows nothing about hunting. So yes, if they can fire a gun, technically they can go, but if they don't understand why they're doing it and what it means, they're not going to go back out and do it themselves. So that's where we have a major gap, is prepping them properly with enough information. And I educated myself at the time online about Namibia, but I still didn't know enough to be dangerous. I feel like there's a serious gap in prepping and then executing the hunt, and then the background to be able to do it again. So the independence that we try to give at She Hunts is, you know, set up your own gun, you know, find out what you're hunting and what is the appropriate ammo and why. Like all of these things that are done for you, it handicaps you later on. So just really figuring all that stuff out.
Was that something, Brittany, when you when you made it over to Africa and you said you took 5 animals, and you said right there that kind of ignited something inside of you that then has now become your passion? Did you dive headfirst into that, or did you have to tie up some loose ends here back in the States? Like as that kind of passion got fueled, what did it look like then for you, let's say in the next couple of years? Like, were you able to spend significant time over in Africa, or were there some gaps as far as years in between when you were able to make it back?
No, I kind of became an Africa bum. I fell so in love with all of it. I wanted to just know more. And so I started going over and actually helping on friends' guest farms. And so I would stay for the 3 months my visa would allow and just help out with clients and help out with guests and do culling in the off season. I just wanted to know all of it. I was like a little sponge at 18, and I just wanted to learn about the business. And that was really, I think, what kind of anchored me in all of this is knowing both sides of the business. You know, not just being a trophy hunter that shows up and takes the trophy and goes home, but rather understanding the business, how it works, herd management, animal management, conservation, and all the things that go with that.
Yeah, because even as somebody who, I mean, I grew up hunting my whole life from the age of 4 until now, have continuously hunted, but it was like your traditional East Coast. I'm from Pennsylvania, kind of whitetail, turkey. We stalked pheasant every year. I hunted bear my whole life, squirrels. Even as somebody who grew up my whole life hunting, I think, and now since we've gotten more involved in the outdoor space, I've been able to educate myself further on things like safari hunts. But the question that I would love to ask you is kind of, what does that, for the average person that sees a photo of a trophy animal on Instagram and that's their entire exposure to kind of the African safari world, what are the biggest misconceptions? And then, like, as somebody who actually had boots on the ground over there, working within the industry, like, and Bear kicked off with it, like, as you educate yourself, you realize, like, oh, not only are these kind of hunting facilities and kind of ranches standing up a lot of these local economies, but then even the method for which animal you're harvesting, there's a science behind it, and there's like very specific reasons. You're not just going over there and killing a trophy animal with no regulation surrounding the type or age or sex of the animal. So can you break down or just kind of describe what are the biggest misconceptions, and then what did you find out as you were actually baked into that culture over in Africa?
Well, I wouldn't want to step on the professional hunter's feet, but I will give you my vague overview. Um, Basically, they have to go through, a professional hunter in Africa has to go through so much schooling and so much testing, especially in Namibia, in order to get their license, that there's animals that they're not allowed to shoot. So if they take a client and the client shoots something young, they can lose their license. So first of all, so there's animals that have to be over a certain age and size in order to be taken, and that's their job to determine for their clients. So the client can't shoot whatever. And that varies from species on how old and how big and all of that stuff. But also just ranch management, and that applies to Texas ranches as much as it does to Africa. But in a herd of zebra, for example, every few years they need to take the herd bull so that the herd stallion, so that bull or the stallion is not breeding his daughters. So in an enclosed space, you can't just let them naturally breed up. There's a point where you need to be replacing that lead stallion in order to keep the genetics from inbreeding. So every few years, they manage these things. And the way that they do it in Africa is amazing. I mean, it's such a grand scale, and they know every animal that comes in and out of those ranches, and they are so careful with their genetics, and they're so careful with what's shot and how long before it's shot. And I mean, they really know everything that's going on there. So these people, it's an art. It really is. And in the off season, they are breeding up the animals. They're selling them at game auctions so that they can switch genetics from place to place so that they're not having issues. And you don't see all of that on the other side, but there's a certain amount that has to be taken every year in order to keep the animals from having sicknesses, illnesses, all kinds of issues. So X amount they give to hunters, and what they can't is called in the off season. So those animals have to go either way, or they're sold off at auction.
And did you feel, as somebody who grew up in LA and then find yourself in Africa, it's something we've discussed on the podcast before. Do you think part of that kind of igniting of that passion within you was also kind of just a complete change in maybe the pace? And I'm making some assumptions here, but the pace of what your life was in LA versus then in Africa?
Oh yeah, it was a completely different world for me, and it was actually a wonderful thing. And I'm so happy that I found it when I did. I absolutely adore hunting, and I adore the people, and I love all of it. But I think for me, it was, trying to find my place in it. I wrote for the outdoor magazines first. When I first started hunting, I started sharing stories, and that was strictly to pay for the plane ticket to get back to Africa. And so I started writing for the outdoor magazines just about my hunts, about my adventures, and selling those articles. And then those turned into TV opportunities where people would invite me as a guest on their show, and I'd follow them around. And then those turned into hosting opportunities. And I did outdoor television for 15 years. And I loved every minute of it. It was incredible. We got to go on incredible adventures all over the world. And it was really the first time in my life where they were like, okay, where are we going this year? And I got to pick those places, and it was super cool. But after that, what am I going to do to leave an impact? Because that's all very self-serving in the sense that it was a great adventure for me, but now what? So I started She Hunts because I felt like that's where we're actually going to make a difference. If dad hunts, dad hunts. But if mom and dad hunts, the kids hunt too. There's no one staying home. So if you get mom out there, the whole family is going to be hunting. That's how we get the next generation to go as well. And we've had just under 300 women come through this camp now, where we teach them how to mount their own scope, how to sight in their own rifles, how to cook wild game. We teach them about shotgunning. We teach them about wild game field dressing. We teach them everything that they need to know to just feel independent. Even if they go with a partner and they never have to gut their own animal, at least they can. So that's kind of where I decided to make a pivot.
That's so badass. And do you host that like at a ranch? And where is that? And how many camps? Okay. How many classes do you do a year?
We do between 4 and 6 a year, and I only take between 12 and 14 per camp. And so we did 6 last year because we're still catching up from COVID, where we missed a bunch that year, but we're doing 4 this year. And it's just an incredible time. We do it at the Record Buck Ranch, which is right outside of Utopia, Texas. They've got 60 species on the ranch. It's like 20,000 acres. It's amazing. So they feel like they're in Africa.
And how has that continued? Like, how has that evolved since you were able to found that? And then what is the way forward with that? Is that something you're looking to like replicate and have different locations throughout the states, or is it like, no, this is our spot, and we've got enough to figure out and expand here?
You know, when I married my husband, he's a tech entrepreneur. He said, "How are we going to scale this thing?" And I said, "Honey, we're not. Honey, we're not going to scale it because I want to spend time with every single woman on the range. I want to watch when they pull the trigger, and I want to work out any kinks we've got. I really enjoy the personal time, which is why I keep the classes so small. So we're not going to scale it. We're not going up from here. We are exactly happy where we are. And it's become something that I put a wait list on if we have too many people, and that's just how it goes. But it's been incredible. We're selling out camps 2 years in advance. I mean, it's awesome. So I'm very happy with my 4 to 6, and I bump it up if I have to. But no, that's about it. And Record Buck Ranch is an incredible spot, and I vetted every member of their staff. I know there's not a single guy there that will bother any of my girls. And I can confidently tell any husband that walks up to the booth at Safari Club International that I've got it. Their wife is safe with me. It's a perfect ranch to do it. And I wouldn't move it around because there's too many variables. You know, we're exclusive there. So there's no other hunters in camp. There's nobody around us except people I know. And I'm a total control freak, in case you can't tell.
Love it. Love it. What are some of the biggest, so, and I think obviously if somebody signs up and or decides to go to the She Hunts camp, like they have a vested interest in attending that, and they've signed up to go there. But what are some of the fears and misconceptions you even see shift in them as they're there for a couple of days and they start to do these hands-on things and learn to mount a scope and shoot in a gun and these things? What would you say? Like, do you see that interest and fear kind of evolve while they're there to when they leave, they're a different person as far as their capability? And I'm sure it seems like that's kind of what gets you excited, is seeing that transformation happen.
There's some kind of magic sauce, and it is awesome to watch. And I have yet to figure out how to put it into my advertising, because wouldn't that be cool? But something clicks, and it is the most amazing, fulfilling thing to watch when a woman comes in and says, "I'm not a hunter. My husband hunts. I might go, but I just want to know more, and we'll see." And she leaves and, "I can do this. This is great. I'm in." You know, and we have so many women that have taken their first animal in camp, and we have such a supportive group, and they come back into camp honking their horn, and all the girls run out and everybody cheers for them, and there's high fives and hugs, and it's like this awesome moment. We get to celebrate together. We all go to a skinny shed together, and it's so much fun. But I do think that one of the things is guns. You know, it's firearm safety. So a lot of women come in timid of the actual firearm, and that's the first thing we address. So I tell them, you know, a hammer is made out of wood and steel, just like a firearm. So you can't hit a nail with a hammer unless you swing it. It's the same thing with loading a rifle. So if it's unloaded and disabled, and I show them how a bolt works and where the firing pin is, it is just as safe as a hammer. There's nothing this thing can do. So we take it apart, I show them the pieces, and then they're able to mount their scopes the first day when they get there with the bolts out, obviously. So they touch the guns, they get familiar with the guns, they understand what they're dealing with. And I feel like that just eliminates a lot of the anxiety that women show up with. You hand a woman a piece of equipment of any kind that she's never played with or had time to spend with, she's going to have the same, how do I use this, as firearms. And unfortunately, you know, because it is a dangerous piece of equipment, we don't use it or handle it until we're actually going to shoot it. So there's no familiarity, there's no muscle memory. So we really try to, you know, obviously remove the bolt, make sure it's 100% safe, and then get them comfortable touching it.
Yeah, I mean and that's not just women either. Like as I said, I grew up on a farm handling guns from the age of 4, and what I realized very quickly when we would have friends who were more from like the suburbs come over that was like 40 minutes away, is like we have 22s out. We're like 9, 12, and like 13, me and my brothers, and like it was just so natural. And then, as you said, like you give somebody a gun that's never had one, and you can literally see it in their being. And you're in the military, Bear. Like that's a whole nother level at the level you guys get trained at. But it was always fascinating to see that, and it is cool that you're kind of tackling that head on and saying like, hey, here's a stepwise fashion that we can get you more comfortable. Because if you're not exposed to it growing up, like being around guns in general, I know for a lot of people makes them extremely uncomfortable. So yeah, it's really cool that you guys have a methodology for kind of approaching that and getting, and specifically females, more comfortable with that.
Yeah, especially as girl dads, man. We got to start thinking about that.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not yet, but I always wonder.
Send them
Man,
over.
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't need my daughter to like become a Navy SEAL or anything, but like I definitely want to teach her a lot of the things, you know what I mean,
For
about
sure.
being able to defend herself and being proficient with a firearm and having some basic ability to land nav and, build a shelter, you know what I mean? So that, I mean, I love what you're doing, because I would imagine that you see that transformation. It's probably honestly just a great time for the ladies to bond and get away from regular life for a minute. I'm surely probably helps the marriage too, if they can go hunt with their husband.
Or makes it worse.
Yeah.
The guy's trying to,
Oh,
no,
man.
just kidding.
I'll tell you, if you've ever tried to teach your wife how to drive a manual vehicle, it's about the same on the range for a lot of husbands and wives.
Oh my
It
God.
can be extremely frustrating, especially, there's all those interrelationship dynamics that come into play, and you want to please them and you don't want to let them down. And there's all this stuff. And because last week I did this not wrong, I want to do this perfectly. We don't have any of that. So they can learn from us and then go confidently shoot with their husbands instead of feeling like a lesser and they have to learn from and ask for help. And
Well,
it helps.
It's such a funny dynamic because I mean I don't know if you've experienced this, but I one time was a married man. She actually owns the business with us, and anything that I was legit good at, which is not that many things, but a couple things, if I tried to teach Mal if it was coming from me, I could have been the best whatever in the world at it, and it's like she will not receive that feedback. But then someone who's like a CrossFit L1 cert that just got their like certification like a week before is showing her how to do like a power clean, and she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that." Blah blah blah. And I'm like, I tried to teach you that 50 times, and I could power clean 350 pounds, and you don't listen to me.
There's the there's the
That's why
interpersonal
she has
relationship.
works, guys.
No. So
Literally is.
that's brilliant. But now I think of like, how would a hunt go down? You know what I mean? That could be horrible.
And it's as Brittany knows as well as anyone. Like it's those are intense moments. Like and depending on each hunt has its own flavor, but like especially if you're in the backcountry with your wife and like there's a whole nother dynamic kind of happening. Actually, I heard when I was prepping. So Christy Titus she's reps kind of our outdoor brand, and I heard you on a podcast with her, and I heard you both laughing about Christy was talking about how she did an 11-day backcountry hunt with her husband, no shower, like in a tent. And then I think you said like, I did that at the beginning of my relationship.
Yeah.
Is that true? And if so, how long was yours, and what hunt was that?
So I was just retiring from TV when I met Brad, and I invited him to go on the last 2 episodes that I had planned for Petersen's Hunting Adventures. And he was like, "Sure, where are we going?" And it was actually a back-to-back hunt in Romania and then Kyrgyzstan. So it was like 20 days, 10 days each. Romania had showers. Kyrgyzstan did not. And Romania was like up at the top of mountains in waist deep snow. And then Kyrgyzstan was 10 days on horseback, packing everything on our horses with us. And it's a good tester for a new relationship. I'll tell you what, we had a blast. It was awesome. I actually fell waist deep into snow, and he grabbed my backpack strap and was able to pull me out. And I realized that's why you date a guy that's 6'5". So that worked great.
And was he a hunter before you got like?
Yes.
Had he hunted? He was. Okay.
Yeah, we actually met because he had booked his first ever African safari with Dirk DeBod, who I had hunted with on my first African safari in 2003, and he was coming to pay his final payment on that hunt, and that's how we met, actually, in the booth at SCI. So no, he was a hunter. He hunted, but he's from Arizona. He hunted mostly mule deer, elk, Arizona stuff, North American stuff, and he was just starting to do his more international hunts. So we did it the other way, and I still haven't killed a bunch of stuff in the U.S. because I wanted to do all the hard stuff and then have kids and do the easy stuff. It's not really easy, but you know what I mean.
As somebody who spent 15 years in 15 years, correct, you were doing like outdoor television. What is, I mean, that other than maybe Sports Center, I grew up, that's all I would watch was either hunting or Sports Center. What is that dynamic like? And what you see on TV, like what is the actual behind the scenes? Because there's always, I mean, we've had actors on here, we had a stuntman on here who like give the true behind the scenes look at like what's actually happening. How would you talk about or speak about kind of the behind the scenes on a hunt that like gets mashed into a 30-minute or 60-minute episode?
I think the creative process behind it is super fun. That's the part that I miss the most. Because you show up in a country with a cameraman and you have to come home with enough clips to tell the story fluently. So, for example, the first time I was alone, just sent off to do it, was a show called The American Huntress. And a lady, Linda Donahoe, she had just had her first grandchild and she wanted some more time. And so she brought me on as a host to split the 13 episode season load with her. And so I took 6 of those episodes the first year. And so the first time we show up there, I brought home what I thought was an episode. And she goes, well, where's the shots of the wheels spinning on the truck as you drive out in the morning? And where's the sunsets and sunrises? What? I didn't know that was part of it, right? So finding a way to fluently tell the story that gives the viewer every bit that they need, that's really the fun part for me, is coming up with a shot list, executing all of that, and then piecing it back together so that it tells the story the way it happened or the way you want it to happen, depending on the show. That was super fun. It was very creative. I also think that, there's stuff that I don't miss. The recreates are not fun, because in the moment with one camera person, you can't get you shooting and the animal going down. So all of the person on the gun pulling the triggers are usually recreates. And that part's no fun, because you gotta be serious when you got a dead animal waiting there and you want to go skin it and do the stuff, and you got to go back and do the recreate and then pretend everything's happening in the real time.
That's funny.
I know you and that's what I've heard is like you almost, and Aaron's even talked about it, is like you have your moments where like you can be in the moment, but it does, whereas a normal hunt, you're really in the moment, especially if you're back in or out in the middle of nowhere. It does create a level of, like you said, kind of like, okay, now you're doing this, and it can break that kind of flow. But that's any filming. Like you're gonna have that, as you said. There's no way to capture that in a kind of continuous story without kind of chopping it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're high budget and you have multiple cameramen, then you can do it. But we were never there.
So. And how did so rewind to when you're going into Africa, like you do your first one with your father. What did that look like for him? I'm sure it was like a moment of probably overwhelming joy, I would guess, where all of a sudden his daughter, who it seems like hadn't shown a ton of interest in hunting, all of a sudden now is very passionate about the space. Is that something right away he was just offering a ton of advice and kind of guidance in? Is that something you were able to lean on in your early years?
Well, you got to go back to the timing. So my dad was filming tracks across Africa in those days. So he was spending about 6 months a year in Zimbabwe. So he wasn't around that much. We did one hunt a year together. From my first hunt moving forward, but the rest of the time he was basically in Africa. So I didn't have a lot of access to him. And in those days, before smartphones and Wi-Fi in camp, this is like a once a week satellite call. So no, I remember the first time I had to do a bird hunt. My dad was in Zim, and I actually went to my local range in LA, and I'm like, anyone know how to teach me how to shoot a shotgun? Because I had learned how to shoot a rifle. And then I had been hunting, and I had actually ended up on a show without ever actually shooting a shotgun properly. And so I got assigned a bird hunt for the show, and I had no clue what I was doing. So I literally went to the local range, and some nice old guys took me under their wing and taught me how to do it. And took me to another range, and we went to one of those driven pheasant deals, and they showed me, okay, now this is where you shoot them and when you shoot them and how to lead it. And I just hadn't done it.
And has that evolved? Did that evolve then over time, or is his time in the field always something where his schedule is like that, just like insane amounts of time in these random spots, or not random, but just like not local?
It can be very random.
Yeah.
No, it has slowed down a lot. He's still, I mean, right now he's filming for Guns and Ammo Television. He's still super active, but he makes time to come to every single one of our camps. We're closer than we've ever been. We hunt more together these days than we ever did before. Now that he's not as full-time as he was with that show, was a huge amount of time. Now we do a lot more stuff together. And it was like an awesome moment when I first started hunting. He was so excited, and we got to plan trips together. It's like, okay, what's your dream hunt for this year? Okay, let's go to New Zealand and get a stag, or what is it for this year? But we had a deal that it was one a year, and I was supposed to be in college during that time. And I ended up dropping out to bum around Africa instead. Not bum, but and I did go back and get my journalism degree. I did it online so that I could live abroad during that time. I was in Africa and the UK during that time. And I think he was super proud when I went back and did that. So that was a huge boost to our relationship as well. But I think the most time that we have ever spent together has come around from she hunts. It's been awesome. He makes time to go to every single one of our 1.0 camps, and he does our bullet seminar because that is so technical, and he is just a walking encyclopedia on this stuff. So he can sit down and explain to them why the 30-06 was named after the cartridge made in 1906 and how it's different from everything else that's millimeters. And, it's awesome to watch. So yeah, that's a super cool deal we've got going.
Was it like that when you were a young girl too? Was that difficult if dad was gone a lot hunting?
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, he loves what he does, and he's so good at it. And he was in really, really high demand in those days. So he was gone a lot, and he was active in the military. So he was in Kuwait for 9 months. When I was 15, I mean, he was gone a lot. It sucked. It did. It sucked. It's nice to have him around now, and he's taking his grandpa duties very seriously. He shows up for everything for my little girl, and it is so cool to watch.
Nice.
Brittany, how did becoming a mother change the way, or not even change? I'll preface it with, like, as a father now of two with a third on the way, I found that, like, is the second I had kids, it focused me in a way that, like, what I was passionate about, I became even more passionate about. And then anything that I wasn't passionate about kind of fell to the wayside. So did you feel a similar, like, did you become like, did she hunts, even having a child, which is a huge life moment, and especially for the mother of a new child, did you still feel that passion was there? And is that something that's maintained even since having your daughter?
I think for she hunts, it made me more passionate about the kids side of things. So getting moms out there, giving moms what they need to be able to take their kids out. On the other side, I am not the fearless hunter that I used to be. I used to think the more dangerous and crazy the hunt, the better. And now I think about my little girl at home needing her mom. So I have been a lot more careful with what I'm willing to do and book, and how long I can be away, and how remote, at least until she's a little bigger. So I definitely pump the brakes on the crazy stuff because she needs a mom. And then on the other side of things, we have women come through camp, and actually, side note, because, ADD, but we didn't know when we started She Hunts that one of our niches would be new widows. So we didn't think that part, at all through. But we've had a lot of ladies come to us, between 30s and 40s, that have lost a husband and don't have the skills they need to take their kids hunting. But it was something they had done as a family prior to losing the husband. Officers killed in line of duty, sporting accidents, all kinds of stuff. And so these, young kids, they still want to go on their hunts that they've done every year, as a family, and now they don't have that mentor anymore. So we've had ladies coming to us to get those skills to be able to take their kids on these hunts that was a family tradition. So that was really cool to watch. And I think as a mom now, I relate so much to that situation, to being the one that has to man up and do that. And, offering those skills to these ladies just makes it even more meaningful.
I'm curious, just for both of you, just now that we're all parents here, and I think this is something, regardless of hunting, everybody can relate to, but finding that balance of pursuing your passion, but still being present. And I think there's some parents that completely throw all hobbies out the window, and it's just like the kids are everything, and all of a sudden you're in sweatpants 99% of the time. You don't have a life. You don't. Maybe you stop taking care of yourself. You know what I mean? It's all for the kids. It's not like it's, that they're bad habits. It's just like, it's so instinctive to be all in for your kids. But you're not filling your own cup. And then I see some parents that seem really okay with kind of just doing their thing and delegating a lot of the parenting. And it's like, man, are you lacking a little bit of the biological instinct of being a parent? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you missing that gene? And I just, because I wrestle with this, because I've reeled in my business travel quite a bit, right? And there's so many things that I could do that are good business opportunities that if I got on a plane and did, like, being in person is so much more impactful than just, hey, let's get on a Zoom call. So I'm way less aggressive on that front. And then, I really don't take any of my own vacations ever. But I wrestle with that of like, hey, at what point, where is the balance? Particularly when you have a passion, like, for you, it's hunting, right? And hunters are gone. There's some guys like all of September, they're literally gone. So I guess what do you think is the proper balance? How do you find that balance? Because again, at some point there has to be collateral damage to the relationship with your kids. If your passion is more important than being present for your kids, but at the same time, you don't want a parent that's, resents not being able to do those things. And this, again, this is just something I think about all the time because I have no idea what the answer is. And I'm just curious y'all's take, because particularly hunting is a great example because you are literally gone. A lot of times you have no comms. All right, I'm back in 13 days and be in the backcountry. See ya. You know what I mean? And if you got a 4-year-old, like that's a little bit, that's a hard sell in my opinion. I've turned on a bunch of the hunts with Aaron. He's like, oh, we're going up to BC for 13 days. And I'm like, dude, I would freaking love to. I got a 3-year-old, but then I'm like, damn, should I? You know what I mean? Ren's never going to remember that. So I don't know. I'm rambling, but I would hear your, like, a female perspective on that.
So let's, disclaimer first, every family's different. Everybody finds their balance differently. So what's right for me is not necessarily right for everybody else. But I definitely feel like, first off, having a support system in place where you feel comfortable leaving, that your child is not going to suffer because you're gone. We're very lucky to have that. I feel like 10 days is probably my cap at this point. We've done it since she was tiny. I think my first trip, she was 18 months, where we did a 10-day, and she did great. And we've been doing that since. And there is a third genre, right? The ones that still do all the hunting and just strap the kid on their back. I'm not there. I'm not brave enough to do that. That I can't. But I think that everybody finds their groove, or they don't. But ours is, if there's no comms, I'm not going. I'm not going. He can go, but I'm not going. If there's comms, I can do up to 10 days. But I do that, once a year, maybe twice if it's a really good opportunity. This year I'm doing a caribou hunt up north. And then we also have a Spain hunt. So there's 2 this year that are 10 days each, but they're spread out. And we have a fabulous support system, and she loves time with them. And so, it works. She's also busy. She's in school now. She's got activities after school. She's got activities on the weekend. So it's not just sitting home pining for mom. I think when she was tinier, it was a lot harder on her. Now, I'm not at school every day anyway, so she doesn't even notice when I'm not there. It's just home at night, and in the mornings, obviously. So I don't know. That's what I tell myself. I don't have all the answers.
I agree, Brittany. I would kick off the same thing you said of each family dynamic's so different, and it really, I think a lot of it depends on, like, okay, are both parents working? Not that is always a huge factor, but then what is the dynamic between the father and the mother? Because each relationship's different too there, as far as like how much some moms like thrive being, home with the children. And then there's some others that like, no, they need their time away. So yeah, I would agree 100%. It's going to look different just per your relationship. And then I think theirs were like, in the alignment really comes with the 2 parents, is like, if it's something that you're passionate about, that you need to fill your cup doing, like, it should be a high priority. Now, does that mean you should be doing it 10 times a year, every single month? Like, no, of course not. Like, there's where the balance comes in. But I think it truly is about finding that balance that works for you and your partner, and then knowing that, like, you showing up better for your kid because you were able to go on a 7-day trip is going to result in better long-term effects than you being resentful because you never do anything, and then your kid's going to pick up on that in the long term too. So I think that's the balance. Like, that's the way I always make priorities as far as like trips and even hobbies and things, is like, does this allow me to show up better for my partner and my kid? And if the answer to that is yes, that doesn't mean just do it until I'm like, do it just continuously, but it means that, like, hey, I show up better when I'm able to detach and go do this. Now find the balance as to how often that is, and know that, like, that will have positive trickle effects on your children, because you want, like, I think one of the biggest things you want your children to see is mom or dad being passionate about something. Like, that's so damn important. Like, because you can put that into words, you can ramble on about chase your dreams, like, find what you love, but it's like, if they don't see an example of that, how the hell are they supposed to know what that even means? So I really believe in that. Like, if you're an example of somebody who, like, had the courage to chase down what you're passionate about, and they see you living that, that makes that decision easy for them, rather than like working a job you hate, never chasing a hobby or a passion that could even be a hobby, that actually is going to have more detrimental effects than you going 2 weeks out of the year to go do something that fills your cup.
I think a lot of people, parents end up with that bitterness, that they gave up everything for this kid. And, if the kid ends up older and ungrateful, well, do you know how much I gave up for you? And I don't ever want to have that, so I think a balancing act is what everyone is dealing with children in every way. But one of those things is definitely keeping your life so that you don't end up bitter later, keeping track of your passions and pursuing the things that you love, so that later when the kids grow up, you still have those things. You don't let go of things that, make you happy, so that later you're mad about it. Raising kids is a full-time job, but there's room in life. You can make room for the other things that you love as well.
You called, like, Brittany, the comment about you saying like a support system is so important, like that can't be understated either, because like when it says like it takes a tribe to raise a kid, I used to always hear that and be like, I don't know, like, no, it doesn't. And then now both my fiance and I being in like a place where we have no family, you realize very quickly like, oh my gosh, like, because and our parents do a great job of both coming down pretty regularly. And it's like, oh, whoa, like this helps so much with just that hum, especially in those first, like the toddler years of like having that support system. And if you're going to do a 10-day trip or a week-long trip, you don't want to just be having some random babysitter stay at your house that the kid kind of knows. Like that's where that can get a little funky for the kid, because it's literally almost like a stranger's watching them. Whereas if it's grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle and they're as comfortable, or not as comfortable, but like just very connected to them as well, that support system can't be understated, because if not, it is a challenge to carve out those like getting away if you don't have that in place.
Well, and we don't have any grandparents locally, and we've both lost our moms. So what we have is I guess a babysitter that you would call, but it's the same woman that's been with us since before Lily was born. And so she knows her, she thinks it's her grandma, she calls her tita. And her time with her is so special. She looks forward to it. She misses her when she's gone, and they video chat. And, it's a special relationship. So we got super, super lucky with that. But even if you don't have family, like you were just saying, you can also build that structure. You just have to be consistent. And finding that is not always the easiest thing to do. And I know people that just struggle with finding that. And it just sucks. It's luck of the draw sometimes, whether you find that person or not. And I do, give parents a lot of credit for still trying to do stuff even when they don't have that steady schedule. So even if it's a babysitter that they don't know that well, sometimes that's the only option they've got. So no shade on those parents that really just try to get out there even though they don't have that.
Well, and I feel like you got to put yourself out there too. I know for us when we were early parents, like I have a brother who lives here, and my daughters they think like those are their second parents, my brother and his girlfriend. So there too, though, like you can convince yourself like, oh, we would never want to bug them of asking them to do an overnight. And then when you finally like ask them, they're like, oh my God, dude, yes, we would love to. And you're like, oh my God, we convinced ourselves for a year that we don't want to bother somebody else. And then when you actually just ask, people are genuinely excited. So yeah, there's a little bit of like, you can self-convince yourself too that like, oh, the support system isn't here, when people are more than happy to help out.
Maybe they didn't know what they were getting themselves into, though.
they didn't say yes the second
You're
time.
Like, oh yeah, you seem pretty stoked.
Yeah.
Let me ask you the second
At 4
time.
in the morning when they're asking for milky.
Yeah, that was me. 5 hours ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, love that. Love that. Well, I want to pivot a little bit. We talked about kind of the misconception sometimes with conservation as it pertains to hunting, and how I would argue it's the exact opposite. And we had an interesting podcast on one of the I think they call it the propositions that's getting introduced in Colorado, and what's kind of being termed by some as ballot box biology. And what I think is interesting about this is it's allowing the general public to have a say on issues that, honestly, in my opinion, just should be left to the people that are the professionals, because it's such a complex thing. How do you have some kid in Boulder who gets to vote on what species are hunted and things like that when he has no clue? He might be an accountant. Like, how does that guy have a say? Of course, it's the democracy. So there's some things, of course, we should vote on, but then I think there's some other things that's like, hey, leave that to the experts. And I think it could create a slippery slope. So I don't know if you're tracking the one in Colorado that'll come up on the ballot in November. It's trophy hunting for bobcats and mountain lion, right? And, you know, casual listener might think, hey, what's the big deal? Like, just don't hunt those. And, you know, why is this a big issue? But I think it opens up precedent for that being in other states. And then you add other species to it. And before you know it, you have people that maybe have no clue having a real say on issues that could lead to the erosion of conservation when they think they're doing the opposite. And I think that's the biggest, the hardest thing that the people that are advocates for hunting are going to have to try to convince these people, because they think us as a bunch of hillbillies that just have bloodlust and want to kill things. And that, again, that 24-year-old, you know, idealist in Boulder, Colorado, it's going to be very hard to convince that individual that's not the case. So, you know, I'm not trying to make you divulge your politics here, but I'm assuming you live in this world. You're aware of that proposition that's going to be on the ballot. What are your thoughts on it? And do you see it as a potential issue in other states? And, you know, if that thing goes, California, boom, they're on it. I mean, I could see this is a domino effect. And now you have a bunch of people in LA, no offense to you, the old version of you, voting on, hey, can we go, you know, hunt this, this, and this? Well, of course not. That's horrible. Why would anyone want to do that? Vote no. And then boom, now you can. So loaded it up. But what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, honestly, I think that the decisions on what can and can't be hunted should be left to conservationists and biologists. This shouldn't be on a ballot, because we're voting with uneducated opinions on a topic that is straight up biology and management. I mean, this is whether animals need to be managed in an area or not based on population is not a yes or no question on opinion. That's simple facts. You know, if you look at the land surveys in Texas, for example, on ranches, you do a survey basically looking down a road. How many things cross in a certain amount of time, and that's how much density you have in X amount of time. And there's a whole equation that goes into it. But the equation behind it, it gives you the answer of X amount of females need to be taken and X amount of males need to be taken yearly in order to sustain the population. So you don't have human-animal conflict, you don't have disease, and there's enough food. Well, the same idea applies elsewhere. And the idea that they would do those surveys, they have the numbers, they know what they're doing, and then to put it out to public opinion on whether or not that's valid doesn't make sense to me. So
why do you think, I mean, how has this even become a thing? Because the North American model for wildlife conservation is it's the golden standard, right? And these people, you know, because we talked about the Colorado one, you have all these biologists that work for the state, but they have no say. You know, they spend millions and millions of dollars on this, and they have the information. And then, despite all of that, all right, we're going to give some kid who's sipping a latte in Boulder a say on what species we can hunt. What? How does that happen?
Quite simply, we have a few flaws in American politics at the moment.
Yeah.
Without getting too far in it.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole here, but I mean, there's no reason that should be something that is voted upon, in my opinion. It either needs to be managed or it doesn't.
And are you worried about it, you know, trickling into other states? Because
100%.
Once you have precedent, every state legislator can say, well, look, in Colorado, that's beautiful. They can't, and okay, let's do that here. And you know, or it's before, I mean, I envision the next election, you're going to have all kinds of state, you know, propositions popping up.
Yeah, well, the bears are another huge issue. I mean, bears in Louisiana, they're trying to open, and it's been on ballots over and over again. And you know, people that don't know about the quantity and the density are voting against because they look cute and cuddly, and it's hard, you know, and it's in my opinion not something that should be voted on. It either needs to be done or it doesn't. But you know, I don't track each state. It is scary. I worry about Arizona. I worry about all the species that we have here, and we're lucky. I mean, Arizona is 80% public land, so there's a ton of hunting to be done here. But if it trickles in here, I mean, we could lose out on a lot of that.
Well, Brittany, I know you have a little girl birthday here coming up around the corner. So before we hop off, anything you want to plug for she hunts that we haven't already talked about, or anything in general that you'd love to give the listeners before we hop off?
Well, we just opened up our 2026 dates, so that's super exciting. We just launched our 2.0 camps last year, so we have an advanced camp now that we do once a year, and those dates sell out 2 years in advance, and it's a lot of fun. So we take all the skills that they learn in the first camps, and we just advance on that. We do a lot more orienteering, we do a lot more survival, we do a lot of long range, we do all kinds of fun stuff. So everything is live on shehunts.com, and I hope you guys will check it out.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for for speaking with us. And if you need any outdoor stuff, we have some killer Frontier 2.0 pants that just dropped. I think you'd love them. Hit us up, honestly. If you need any gear, we can absolutely swag you out. I think the girls on the team nailed it, and we're excited about it. But good luck with everything. So cool what you're doing. Thank you for being a champion for hunting and conservation. And you got an ally over here, so we appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been nice. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you, Brittany.
See ya.